Kemono Jihen is the best shonen you've never seen. And I say that because the recent anime went completely under the radar and the manga has no official translation. So odds are you've seen like maybe a photo or two of the anime. If that is the case, then you need to start this show. Kemono Jihen is a great anime filled with mystery, incredible fights, and interesting takes on the usual battle shonen type tropes. That's why in this video I'm going to give you 3 reasons to watch Kemono Jihen and explain why I can't wait to start the manga. Be warned that this video contains minor spoilers for the first few episodes. I'll be approaching this based on what happens in the anime, so forgive me if I miss certain details from the manga. Before I get started, make sure to comment with your thoughts on Kemono Jihen. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week in the next video. This week's comment goes to Azam Jamal for sharing their thoughts on SHUEISHA. If you'd like more anime and manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. To get started, let's look at the first reason to watch Kemono Jihen, the world. And I know the world is a pretty ambiguous way to put it, but what I'm thinking of goes beyond just world building. The world of Kemono Jihen takes place in a version of our world in Japan filled with supernatural creatures known as kemono. Okay, so at this point you might be thinking, so far so good. Anime in Japan, got it. Show called Kemono Jihen with kemono in it, got it. Seems simple enough. And while Kemono Jihen does come off as a bit basic, it's very well thought out in terms of the world, the characters in that world, and how they all interact. The main character, Kabane, works for a detective agency in Tokyo that solves mysteries surrounding the kemono. In this world, the kemono live in Tokyo but go out of their way to blend in with humans. Add in the fact that a lot of the kemono either look like humans or can transform into humans, and finding these kemono becomes a pretty difficult task. In this sense, it's a little more nuanced than something like Jujutsu Kaisen. In Jujutsu Kaisen, it's pretty easy to tell the difference between the curses and the humans. The curses are almost always bad guys, and you can't even see them unless you have cursed energy. And for the most part, all the missions are basically the same. Bad guy go burr, you go stop bad guy. But Kemono Jihen is different. First of all, anyone can see kemono. It doesn't matter if you're a kemono, a hybrid, someone who isn't a kemono but dated one in college, everyone can see them. Ironically, this makes them tricky to find because they go out of their way not to stand out. When Kabane and his friends are on a mission, you really have no idea who's really a kemono, unless they do something pretty obvious like, oh, I don't know, turn a bunch of sex-depraved degenerates into cats. Something like that is a pretty big giveaway. And this makes the missions a lot more fun to watch because they actually come with a genuine sense of mystery. Another way Kemono Jihen is different from Jujutsu Kaisen is that the abilities aren't based on any kind of universal power system. In Jujutsu Kaisen, humans and curses have powers based on their use of cursed energy, which everyone can use. This makes it pretty easy to place the characters into power levels. But in Kemono Jihen, only the kemono have abilities, and those abilities are based on your anatomy rather than a common power system. For example, Shiki was born from an arachne, meaning he can use certain spider-based abilities. Akira, who is 100% my favorite character, can use ice abilities since he comes from a village of ice users. Essentially, a character's abilities are limited to the specific kinds of abilities you would expect that kind of creature to have. And while there is a general hierarchy, this diverse power system makes for interesting fights because you really never know how certain matchups might play out. Now, the more interesting hierarchy is the ecosystem the kemono have set up in Tokyo. At the very tip top, you have Inagami and Inari, who each control their own halves of Tokyo. Inagami, who works with Kabane to solve mysteries, goes out of his way to check the power of Inari. Meanwhile, Inari is always looking to gain power, but is generally willing to work with Inagami as long as it serves her interests. Then, under those two, you have people who work for them like Kabane, Akira, and Shiki, and then even more kemono who kinda just do their own thing. As a result, viewers get this intense story where everyone has their own competing interests, and the characters are constantly making moves knowing full well that they can't upset this balance of power unless they want to start a full-out war. And this is why the world of Kemono Jihen is so cool. The diverse abilities make for exciting, well-balanced fights. The kemono ecosystem leads each episode to play out like a game of politics, and the setting of Tokyo places viewers in a mysterious world where you really never know what to expect. Now, the second reason you should watch Kemono Jihen is for the interesting spins on shonen. And I know, shonen is a demographic, not a genre, but there's definitely certain tropes that are common among the demographic, especially among battle shonen. For example, kabane doesn't really have any big dreams or goals. This isn't true for every shonen, but more often than not, the main characters want to be a hero, pirate king, wizard king. Either that or they have some big goal like killing all the titans or saving the entire planet from petrification. But kabane just wants to find his parents. In this sense, Kemono Jihen is a lot like Bleach in Mob Psycho 100. The story isn't so much about the main character reaching a goal as it is about them growing up and figuring out who they really are. And there's plenty of other ways kabane is unique from most shonen protagonists. Kabane is a good boy who likes to do good things for people, but he's also someone who can be absolutely ruthless in a fight. So he's pretty different from a lot of the other nicer shonen protagonists who have to learn to be tough against their enemies. Plus, unlike a lot of shonen protagonists who are just plain stupid, Kabane just doesn't know about the world since he grew up in a small village by himself and never had anyone to talk to. This makes him hilarious to watch because he either has no clue what something is, or he does but takes things way too literally. For example, Shiki asks him early on how he got to Inagami's office. Shiki, of course, is looking for a reason, but Kabane looks at him with a straight face and says, "A car." But speaking of Shiki, he falls into the category of characters in shonen that you would generally consider the edgy or rational characters. Uryu, Megumi, Piccolo, and Zoro are just a few examples. They're not rivals, they're just there to balance out the main character's optimism. And this is exactly what Shiki does. But Shiki is still a unique character because, as we see in the second episode, this overly rational behavior is just Shiki's way of dealing with his problems. So it actually ties into his character and is more than just the role he serves in the story. But you also have Akira, who is completely different. Akira would fall into the category of the useless character. These are the characters like Zenitsu, Sakura, and Usopp, who aren't nearly as impressive as the main character and have to force themselves to not be so, well, useless. But Akira stands out from the typical useless character because, even though he's not that helpful in a fight, he has a certain positive energy that keeps things light in a world full of dark mysteries and harsh realities. Plus, unlike a lot of useless characters, Akira isn't unbearably annoying. Most of the time he's just taking selfies or eating sweets. I don't know about you, but I aspire to be as iconic as Akira. And these are just a few examples of why shonen fans like myself should love Kemono Jihen. It borrows the familiar elements of all the classics, but puts its own spin on them in a way that makes it truly unique. But now let's discuss the third reason you should watch Kemono Jihen. The themes. And I'm sure I sound real original by just saying the themes, but it's kinda hard to get specific without completely ruining the story, so just bear with me. Generally speaking, Kemono Jihen is a lot more mature in its narrative than most shonen and can actually get pretty dark. For example, the main characters are the monsters of this world. More often than not, the main characters in shonen are usually the humans who need to fight the monsters. Bleach, Demon Slayer, Hunter x Hunter, Attack on Titan, Fire Force, the list goes on. But in a lot of those types of stories, the main character also happens to be part monster. The difference though is that those stories usually offer a message that goes something like, just because you're part monster doesn't mean you're any less human. But in Kemono Jihen, being a kemono is an important part of the characters. I can't remember if it was on Reddit, but someone made the perfect analogy by comparing Kemono Jihen to the X-Men, which makes a lot of sense if you just swap kemono for mutants. Like mutants, the kemono usually have to suppress their powers so they don't stand out. So unlike in most shonen where the human qualities would be the more desirable ones, here they're actually a sign of the characters having to hide who they really are. This is especially emphasized by the kitsune characters, who have a human form but reveal their kitsune faces whenever they get emotional. And the great part about it is that this ties into the ecosystem we talked about earlier. The kemono have these instincts and feelings, but they also have to suppress them so that they can live with humans and not stand out. This leads to an incredibly immature narrative where Kabane and the young characters are forced to face their problems and be honest with their feelings, rather than hide from or ignore them. But the flip side to this is that it also leads to lots of morally gray characters who justify hurting and using others as part of those instincts. Even Kabane expresses that he's generally okay with this, often comparing people to animals and saying he understands that they're just doing what's in their interest. This way, Kemono Jihen avoids portraying the characters strictly as good or evil. Instead, it offers a story where, much like their ecosystem, the characters understand that there's lots of different people with their own values that aren't necessarily right or wrong. And this is exactly why Kemono Jihen is so fun to watch. On top of the engaging world and unique spins on shonen, it offers a mature narrative filled with characters who learn to be honest with their feelings in a society filled with conflicting values. And that's it for this discussion. If you enjoyed this discussion, then make sure to like the video. Also make sure to follow me on Twitch, where I'll be discussing new chapters of Dr. Stone and other Shonen Jump manga every Sunday. And if you'd like more anime and manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.